Before we dive in, here's another show you can enjoy in the True Story FM family of entertainment podcasts.
Hey, psst. Hey, you see that Snickers over there? If no one's looking, you should just take it.
No! Don't listen to him, my son. That would be stealing, and stealing is a sin.
Sin Schmin, it's a freaking Snickers bar. You deserve to have it. Sinning really satisfies you.
Repent, my child. Virtue is the only real snack worth savoring. For that candy bar is merely a gateway to nougat damnation. Has this ever happened to you?
Listening to the devil on one shoulder and an angel on the other, and you're not sure what to think?
Then we're here to help. I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Tommy Metz III, and this season on All the Feelings, we're examining the 7 deadly sins.
You know, the fun ones.
And the 7 heavenly virtues.
Which are also a thing. Through personal stories, historical oddities, and way too much embarrassment, we take you on a thrilling journey through all the goods and the bads you hear about in church.
But without all that pesky church stuff. So come join us for All the Feelings Season 9, a sometimes funny podcast about being human. All the sins, all the virtues.
All in one place. Go to allthefeelings.fun to learn more, or subscribe to All the Feelings wherever you get your podcasts.
Game over.
Horror movies get a bad rap. They're cheap thrills, mindless gore, not cinema, blah, blah, blah.
But we here at Sitting in the Dark know better. We know that horror is more than just jump scares and chainsaws. It's a reflection of our deepest fears, our anxieties, Okay, and there's a lot of jump scares and chainsaws.
Join us, Pete Wright, Tommy Metz III, Kyle Olson, and Keenan Diaz, as we cut into the dark heart of horror cinema.
Every episode, we explore a different facet of the genre, from survival horror to home invasions, from zombies to birds. We tickle the tropes, analyze the angles, and sharpen our own axes along the way.
We'll introduce you to the classics that shaped the genre.
And the modern masterpieces that are pushing the boundaries of terror.
Sitting in the Dark is your guide to navigating the terrifying, thrilling, and sometimes hilariously bad world of horror movies.
We'll help you understand why we love to be scared.
And maybe even convert you into a horror fan yourself.
So turn off the lights.
Close the basement door.
And join us.
Sitting in the dark.
Hello, world. Welcome to the Adrian Moment on TrueStory.fm. I'm Ocean, and I'm joined as always by my partner in sports movies dissection, Jim Pullen.
What's going on, Ocean?
Well, I'm living the dream. I'm going away from my typical comparison of the two of us that I've been doing lately, because I couldn't decide in the movie we're talking about which one of us was Frank Hopkins and which one of us was Hidalgo. And so, therefore, I decided to exactly, yeah. So I decided to not do that, and I think that this movie is really a departure for us as far as what we normally talk about, is how sports movies are structured. Most of our movies involve a team or an athlete that's going to persevere and work through a thing and then go to a single event. I think that the interesting thing for me with this movie was that it doesn't feel that same way. It is much more of an adventure movie, and it's one of those things of where I think that people would have to kind of bear with us for a bit for us to explain, well, this is how this is a sports movie. Because of the event that occurs, in the movie, the main thing happens over the course of really the last half. It feels more like you're just going through an adventure versus you're experiencing a sporting event. To not bury the lead, the movie that I'm talking about is Hidalgo.
My father was a cavalry scout, and he fell in love with the chief's daughter. Married her. I was never really sure where I belonged. Sometimes I think the only one I can count on is Hidalgo. You've done me proud, partner.
Frank Hopkins and Hidalgo are legends. They've never lost a long-distance race.
Perhaps you have never heard of the great ocean of fire. A 3
3,000-mile race across the Arabian desert.
We're betting on the last American cowboy.
You think we got one more in us?
I'm greatly pleased that you've accepted my challenge.
What breed is your stud?
Hidalgo's a mustang.
Mustang?
Also the Red Indian, small mixed blood.
Mixed.
Mustangs don't belong in races with thoroughbreds.
You can say anything you want about me. I'm gonna have to ask you not to talk about my horse that way.
Maybe we should give you a head start.
I'm not here to insult anybody, sir. Call it. I'm just here to race.
Touchstone Pictures presents...
Your horse is too small. This land is too dangerous. You are gambling with your very life.
The incredible true story of a man who went halfway around the world to find himself.
The Indians of the West. Have you seen their vanishing kind?
I am their kind.
And the friendship that inspired a legend.
Hidalgo is the one who believes in you. But can you believe in yourself?
Hidalgo.
What? I didn't get you into this, you got me into it.
The thing about this movie, why I thought it was different and why I thought it was an interesting thing to talk about in the context of a sports movie is the crux of this movie is a 3,000-mile long race through the Arabian desert. It starts in Saudi Arabia, and I believe it goes through Iraq, and it ends on, I don't remember the name of the sea it ends on. The race itself, is because it's 3,000 miles long, is in fact a horse race. So effectively, this would be analogous to the Ford versus Ferrari, where they are endurance racers, but they are just doing it on horses instead of in a car. And it's set in 1890, so the horses make more sense than if it were set in 1990. Then you'd be like, well, why don't you just drive? Because the movie is structured this way, it doesn't have that feeling of, okay, well, here's the big race or finale or thing at the end. It has much more feeling of you're going through the race through most of the movie. And so I think that it still, though, to me, this qualifies as a sports movie because A, I was actually surprised that I liked it as much as I did. And B, is because, well, horse racing is horse racing. If we were talking about a Kentucky Derby movie, no one would be having an argument. I think it's interesting to discuss how an adventure movie can actually be a sports movie. So what did you think of this movie?
First of all, you captured it amazingly well. I'll be honest. I went into this movie when I saw it on our list and we agreed to do it. I was like, I don't know if I'm going to like it. One, it's PG-13, it's Disney, I'm just like,
yes,
man, I don't think I'm really going to enjoy this. And then I see that it's like 2 hours and 15 minutes or 16 minutes or something that just irks me. I don't know why. Just like the 2-hour movies, I just like, oh man. And I know it's like more of a standard now, but, and I get over myself and it's okay. I end up liking it. But this movie, yeah, I was like really shocked as I'm sitting there watching it, how much I was enjoying the story that was being presented to me, and the thought and the aspect of a 3,000-mile race on a horse in the middle of a desert was just like, I don't know, it was just blowing my mind, and it was bonkers to me that I'm sitting there watching it and enjoying it. And then I was like, man, this has got a really good adventure feel, as you're saying. And then I was like, this kind of got an Indiana Jones vibe to it.
Really?
Yeah. So then I'm digging into it, and the director...
Like the first Indiana Jones or like the most recent ones?
No, like the first, yeah, like some of the initials.
Okay,
yeah.
So the good ones.
Right, the good ones.
Okay, all right.
And the director's tied to those. So, is he? I believe he is. So, it was like...
Right, if not, we're just saying it, we don't need facts.
But, to me, it felt like that structure, like some of the music during like some of the more adventurous scenes was akin to me as to like an Indiana Jones type story, and like trumpets or, the orchestra. And I don't know, I was just really digging it and just really enjoying it, and was extremely surprised how much I was sitting there just like probably a big smile on my face, enjoying a movie. And it felt like it's been a while that I've sat down and just like enjoyed something from beginning to end. And I enjoyed it because of all these little encounters that he was coming across, in the race.
Which one stands out to you?
Well, there were many. But to get kind of right into it, like how he helped save the Sheikh's daughter. It's all the crap that he was dealing with. So this is like the middle of the race, right?
It is. It is after the first leg of the race, and then
Right.
but before the second.
Yes. So that aspect of everything that was leading into that, where, he's the infidel, right? And it's already assumed that, he's the horrible person that he is because he's an infidel. And then he's caught in a situation where it looks like, he's the bad guy or the typical man just trying to, get a little piece of some woman action. And it looked like he was taking his daughter into a tent situation. And that's not what the situation was. She was there.
Oh, you mean when she goes into his tent?
Right.
Yep. Okay. Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, he's very chaste throughout this movie.
Yes, very much so. You have all of that is leading into she gets taken, and then he's able to prove to the Sheikh that, hey, look, I'm going to go and get her. I'm going to go all cowboy, and I'm going to go and get her. And he gives him that deadline. Like, you can go and do this.
Well, yeah. The deadline was one day.
One day. Yeah. It was the day of, but before sundown, right?
Exactly. Yeah. You have till sundown tomorrow. And I was like, wow, well, way to give me a lot of time to work out this problem.
Right. But, to be able to be a cowboy and be able to go and do that, and then, show the adversity of like, look, I'm here. I'm not here for all these purposes that you're putting upon me, which, he just continues. He and his horse face all these various adversities throughout the movie. And it's one of these encounters to show he's the good person that he is being portrayed with his horse. His purpose is to be a good person and to make sure that everybody's in good nature and in good spirits. And, he's just a good guy. He's just there to help and show like, hey, I'm not the bad guy that you think that I am. I liked that whole connection between the adversities that he was facing in that camp and how he was an infidel throughout the race and all that. And then, the Sheikh is there to make amends with him after he brings his daughter.
There is, of course, the part of where his motivation of doing that was because the Sheikh was going to castrate him. And he was like, well, I'd like to not have that happen. So how about I go get your kidnapped daughter instead, and we call it even.
Right.
While I do agree with that as far as the little things, I think that there is part of it where really to just step back and talk about this movie. I think you have to talk about it somewhat chronologically in terms of how they set the stakes. I think that is a great example of what the adventure in the middle is, and kind of where that adventure in the middle does muddy this being a sports movie. The adventure in the middle and then the beginning of him taking the orders for the Wounded Knee massacre, which we will get to the depiction of that along with various other things later on in our bonus episode, which is about the veracity of the truthfulness of this movie. The first thing the movie says is it's based on a true story. So we're going to talk a bit about where truth and fiction lie in this movie. After he gives the orders, and then a massacre of Wounded Knee happens, and he has the regret. He has that period of time where he's in the Buffalo Bill, the Buffalo Bill show? I don't remember the full name of the show, but it was the Buffalo Bill show. And so where he's in that show, and there he is basically just working for a living, hating himself. Really kind of reenacting that, which was an interesting way of self-flagellation on his part, where he effectively is reenacting a scene that he knows how it went. He knows it went differently. He's doing it for entertainment, and it's as if he's doing it because he hates himself. The initiating event is when Aziz comes from Saudi Arabia and demands that they change the name, or at least the moniker, that he is the world's greatest distance horse racer.
Yes.
And they have to change the moniker, or they need to pay $1,000 for him to enter this race. Which, this is 1890, so $1,000 is a lot of money.
A scratch.
It is. And so then so that they has to do that in order to, they have to decide. And what they seemed to come up with was the people in the show put the money together. And then he then is going to then enter into this race. Then they have some small stuff here and there, which we can talk about with the trip, but let's just skip over that for now. But then when he gets to the race itself, the first part of it is about how daunting it is. It is a 3,000-mile horse race. And so for context, you're going across the United States. You're going across, I think, back half of the way to cover 3,000 miles. on a horse. So this is a long endurance race, and it takes us definitely a special kind of not only rider as far as how you ride the horse, but also just how you manage terrain and distance and food, water, and all this other stuff about that you need to keep the horse alive and keep you alive through the trip. And so the first leg was already described as how people, fell out of it and died. And 40 riders start and 29 of them died or dropped out or didn't make it or whatever. You only go.
And the Sheikh himself, he's like, I had 5 sons and 3 died in the race alone,
Exactly. So he's doing that first part. And that was really the first part of where we see our hero here is that he is able to then persevere through not only the adversity that he's dealing with. There's prejudice against him because he's an infidel, and there's prejudice against his horse because the other horses are all thoroughbreds, and his horse is a non-purebred Mustang, and that they have no business being in this race, and that they should then just quit and go home, and that the other racers view it as an affront. And that part to me, I don't know if you felt this as well, but that part to me is, well, that's a lot of sports movies. There's always a sports movie where the outcast kid who's a little bit different isn't really accepted and is told, hey, why don't you quit because you're not doing things the way that we do it.
Yeah, no, there's so many sport movies that have that temper around it, even one of my all-time favorites, Sandlot. It's the same thing.
Yeah, I'd never seen the Sandlot.
Okay, that's going on the list.
All right.
So there's that in that movie, and then there's everything. Miracle, right?
Yes.
We did Miracle not too long ago. That's the same. It's the same thing. It's a bunch of guys that aren't the best players. They're not the top NHL guys. They weren't NHL guys, and you were putting them in front of the world. Like, how could you do that? It was like they was the best of what they needed for that moment. And yeah, Hidalgo, same thing. Like all the adversity and all the doubt that they face, that you can't do this. You and your Pony Express don't belong here. It's a classic sports movie against that kind of little guy adversity.
Oh, just to actually put a pin on a couple of things we talked about. So $1,000 in 1890 is $34,648 today. And you are correct. The director of this, Joe Johnston, he did do art direction and visual effects on Raiders of the Lost Ark. So we have not made up a fact.
All right.
He was in fact tied to the Indiana Jones.
I thought I couldn't find it in my notes. Thank you for checking.
Yeah, absolutely. Real-time fact checking here on the Adrian moment. I like to think of this more as a sports movie and straight ahead, as far as he is an endurance horse racer who is then dealing with the bigotry of the people around him to then try to overcome them and be accepted and be the best racer. But there's also the part of it, the early stakes of the Lady Anne Davenport, who has basically bet, I think, 40% of her fortune that her horse is going to come in first, and if her horse does, then she gets a whole bunch of money, and if the horse doesn't, then she gets wiped out. The prince who is engaged to Sheikh Rai, I can never really pronounce this name. It's Sheikh Riyadh, Riyadh, Riyadh. I'm not really sure how to pronounce it. It was played by Omar Sharif, who, honestly, this is the first movie that I've really ever seen with Omar Sharif that I'm aware of. And yes, I recognize Omar Sharif was a big deal for Lawrence of Arabia. I have not seen Lawrence of Arabia, so don't get upset about that, but that's just the deal. And when I saw him in this movie, I was like, this guy is amazing. He should be in more movies. Unfortunately, that's not going to happen since he is not alive anymore. But at the same time, I was like, he was great. I wanted him in Gladiator. I wanted him in a lot of movies. I was like, well, we could have cast him in a lot of things. And so there was a Prince Bin Al Ray who was promised to be, Jazeera was promised to him to be his 5th wife, which is like, well, it's your 5th wife. So how serious are we taking this?
It could be Friday.
It's like, you're my 5th wife. It's like, look, if I were to be with a different wife each weekend, I only be with you like 3 times a year, because only 5 Saturdays, that only happens, so it's like, you just kind of on the side. And so so she promised to be his 5th wife, and he was riding the Sheikh's horse, and all the structure and the culture around that, and that is kind of the table stakes of where all of this is set. That all of that is happening independent of him, and inside of all of this intrigue or drama or different stakes, you insert this American cowboy on his Mustang, that is multicolored Mustang, and they're like, well, what is this? what's this infidel cowboy coming in trying to race with this? And so I think that is not only the regular fish out of water that you have from a lot of sports movies, but also an interesting, commentary just on bigotry, right? Or not bigotry or prejudice, where you're judging someone based on the characteristics that that you've been told, and not anything about the person themselves or anything that they themselves have done. It was just they did not meet whatever the standard was that was in your head. And I thought that was an interesting thing that was portrayed in this movie to start it out, and the absolute belief that he would not make it through the first leg of the race.
Right. Yeah, and there's a lot of judging in this movie too, and showing us how this continues to be a sports movie with the various adversities that he's dealing with. Like I was taking notes in it, and I was creating a list of all the various adversities. And for this particular sport, you're dealing with all of the different, it's a foreign land to the guy, right? It's the heat, the lack of water, and each sport has all these different adversities as well. But I mean, it gets even further insane. I mean, it's like, what sport is out there that you have to worry about, I don't know, quicksand?
Not enough of them. I'm gonna say that right now. So
No.
I think quicksand should be thrown into a lot of things. Yeah, they should. You should throw that in the football, every now and then, some random place in the field, there's a yard line where it's this yard line is quicksand. So
maybe the XFL could take that up.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it'd be another rule change for the NFL to think about later.
Exactly. But it was I know that we're talking here that, this is definitely a sport movie, but I don't know, just all the different adversities that he has to deal with on this race just continues to prove just how insane the idea of a 3,000-mile race is. This just blows me.
It does. And I guess, in sticking with the one thing with the first leg, which is the adversity that I thought was the most interesting to me, is you're overcoming not only the fact that you don't know the terrain, you don't know the area, you don't know the weather, you don't know a whole lot of things. You're just kind of following along.
Did they show us a map? How does he know? Sorry. I just I have no idea. I was bonkers when I was watching it. I'm like, how the hell do you navigate this? Other than the hoof prints in front of you, and then the windstorm happened. I'm like, you're screwed now.
Exactly. And that was the one I wanted to talk about, was the sandstorm.
Yes.
And,
okay.
and that the idea that, well, first off, when the sandstorm comes up and happens, you're like, okay, well, you got problems now. But his ability to identify that it's a sandstorm, because, the part of it is when you watch, a lot of times when you watch movies, I find that you start thinking about things in terms of modern times. And while I have never seen a sandstorm in real life, I know what it is. And I know what it is. I know how it's going to work. I know what it's going to do. And I know, if you come around one, that you should seek shelter to then try to not get the entire effects of the sandstorm. But it is interesting to me that in 1890, news didn't travel like this. So effectively, the desert is doing a thing that he would have thought up to that moment is impossible for a desert to do, because effectively a sandstorm looks like a big wave.
Right.
And so he's like, well, I'm not in water. And while he may, because of the boat and everything like that, understand what a wave is, look at that. But the desert is now doing something that he would be like, this is not possible. And that he was able to then figure out in that moment, split second, hey, I need to race as fast as I can to this building, which he had to then try to trust was going to stand.
Right.
If I didn't know what a sandstorm was, and I saw it for the first time, and I started racing to the building, it's really at that point more of a thing of where it's like, well, I might as well, because otherwise I'm just going to lay here and die, because I don't think the building is going to survive that thing.
No, I agree. I thought about the same thing, right? I was like, man, he's probably never seen anything like this. But I think the only thing that he may have seen in any of the races across America, or in any of the deliveries of a letter that he potentially was authored or asked to do or given money to do, is the monsoons in Arizona and Utah and in and around that area. When the monsoon breaks down, there is a wave effect that you can watch come towards you, and you can feel the pressure that when the monsoon breaks down.
I may not be understanding what a monsoon is. When you say a monsoon, I'm thinking of water.
No, it's a body of water, yes. But as the storm breaks down, it puts so much pressure that it does lift up dust from the desert floor. and it's a wave of dust and a wave of water that comes at you. It's absolutely insane. When we lived there, it was crazy. You could see it hit as the storm broke down. You could watch this wave of dust and grossness come at you.
Okay.
Followed by with rain as well. It's insane. So I'm just saying that I think it's entirely possible that he has encountered something like that.
Okay, that he's seen a monsoon.
But it's way different though.
Okay.
Right?
Well, look, you're giving that is an extra level of credit, because the tornado was the closest thing I could think of to it. But yeah, if a monsoon was closer, I had not even thought of a monsoon. And now that I'm looking at what it is, it's like, yeah, I don't want to be a part of a monsoon.
Monsoons, I mean, they're pretty cool. Some of the more destructive ones are obviously not cool. But yeah, we've been in some when we lived down in Arizona for a short little while. We've been in some that, like, your pool is crystal clear and beautiful, and then a monsoon comes in and it looks like a mud bath. Like, it's absolutely disgusting.
Oh, just kicked up all the dust and dirt and everything and dumped it into the pool.
Yeah, because the way that the monsoon, it like lifts the air up off the desert floor, and it brings up all of, for the most part, like the air impurities, but also the desert floor. So it picks up a lot of dust, and then it when the storm breaks down, it's like a thunderstorm, but the way it breaks down is different than a thunderstorm, the way that it breaks itself down. So the cell breaks as it creates, and then it puts all this bomb force energy into the air, and then it distributes air and water when the cell breaks down. So read up, it's crazy.
Okay.
And if you're in Arizona, feel free to fill us in on some more information. I know I'm not saying all the right things. There's a crazy, like, scientific name for it. It sounds like Beelzebub, but it's not Beelzebub. That's how I just remember it in my head. But it's a Habib. That's what it is. It's a Habib.
You went from Habib to Beelzebub. Those are two very different meanings.
I know, but it's like a Habib. It's I might not be saying it right, but that's like the technical term of the storm, and it's the way that it yeah. Anyways, we can move on, but it's cool. You gotta take a look at some videos of monsoons.
All right, I will have to do that. Then that was your meteorology minute, brought to you by the Adrian Moment. All right, so then, as far as what the movie goes, the ability to navigate and do the sandstorm, I found that to be impressive, and then that was the main thing as far as the getting through the first leg that he did, and then that brings us to the adventure you talked about as far as saving the daughter, and also I think the most poignant part of where the movie delves a bit more into him as a person, in terms of he is half Lakota, half European American, and that he seems to be going through, he definitely is going through a lot of self-hate about that because of what happened to Wounded Knee and his role in it, even though his role was just delivering the orders, which is, it's not nothing, but it's not like, he didn't mow them all down with his muskets. So there's that, but he's going through a lot of self-hate because he didn't do anything that could have changed things there, which maybe he could have, maybe he couldn't have. We'll never know. So the relationship between he and Jazeera, where they are in cultures that define them certain ways, and they have personalities that conflict with that, and that they are trying to figure out how they can be themselves in the cultures that they live in. Because interestingly, Jazeera would probably live a more accepted life and a life closer to what she wanted if she were in America. And and also I think there's an aspect of where he would live the life closer to what he wanted if he was in Saudi Arabia.
Oh, what?
Yeah, I think so.
You think?
Yeah, I do, because effectively the one part of the theme throughout this movie is about how this Saudi Arabian, at least the section he's dealing with in the Saudi Arabian culture, is a horse culture. Native Americans are a horse culture, and so he really was finding that, like, his way and the way he wanted to be and the life that he wanted to live was more there. Now, true, the character's understanding and treatment of women is far more modern than what we think of as the average American male in 1890. But at the same time, with that aside, it is still that the culture and how things were and what he could do and what he could be and who he could be seemed to fit better for him had he lived in Saudi Arabia.
I had never thought that, Osh. That's wow. No, that I wish I had a good rebuttal for that. Like, no, I can't see that. I mean, the only thing that I could not see that isn't a parallel in his life in the Americas versus there is just the way that he would treat a woman versus the way that
yes, absolutely,
that he would be, pressured culturally. But I think he being the person that he would, I think he would stand up and probably break down the barriers or whatever in the local region if he was to live there in the Arabic country. But
I think he'd break down the barriers insofar as he would treat women the way he feels they should be treated.
Right.
He wouldn't change the culture. Like everyone else would still do whatever they do. He would just be like, I'm not going to do that.
Right. And I think his equal peers that wouldn't be willing to see him as an infidel would be willing to be like, okay, like if my woman fell down and he was nearby, you could extend a hand to lift her up, where, he was trying to do that earlier to the Sheikh's daughter. And she was like, oh no, you can't touch me. Like, I think in his local region, that would be acceptable because, he's not an infidel and his peers in that situation if he was to be there.
Well, he'd still be an infidel because all infidel means is you haven't accepted Muslim, you don't believe in Allah.
Right.
So
but
he'd always be that.
Yeah, the Sheikh forgave him. So since the Sheikh forgave him and no longer call him infidel, nobody would care.
Well, the Sheikh...
It only takes one to accept him.
The Sheikh forgave him insofar as that, okay, so let's jump ahead of that. That scene isn't about the Sheikh forgiving him. The Sheikh was just allowing himself to understand and treat him as a human. The Sheikh already knew that whole, I can't touch an infidel or I can't... predict the future. He knows he can't do that. He knows that's all myth. That's all just legend and lore. And so he just fed into it because it helped him out, because he thought people that do not believe the way he believes are lesser. And so therefore he could then treat them as such, and that is fine. And in this instance, he found someone that he decided to judge on his actions and what he had done. And so he was able to accept him. And so then he just shook his hand. But that's really all that was. It didn't have to do with the fact that he's not an infidel. Even in the moment, he says, well, what about shaking the hand of an infidel? Won't that make it where you can't predict the future? And he's like, well, if I could predict the future, I would have bet on a painted horse.
I would have bet on a painted horse, yeah.
So then because of that tells me that it was really more about breaking down the barriers of the prejudice, not breaking down the barriers of the fact that we have different religious beliefs. That was going to be maintained.
Okay, true. All right. No, very good point. I was just using that as a celebratory moment for if, his peers, given the hype, that the idea of him moving there and being in that environment and in that culture, that because the Sheikh and the shaking of the hand, the shaking of the Sheikh's hand.
That's a lot of shaking in that sentence.
It is. You said shake 8 times. Shaking of the Sheikh's hand.
Here we go. Here's worse. Your sentence is very shaky.
Oh.
Yes.
Your sentence is very shaky.
Yes. You're welcome, America.
Yeah. Thank you. Anyways.
So let's talk about the story for a second. So I feel that now we have preambled for about 15 minutes and gone on a tangent to get back to, okay, so they have the adventure with the Jazeera. He now understands the different politics around with Khatib. Khatib is the nephew that wants to own the Sheikh's horses, to be the horse breeder. He's had his experience with Sakir. I think it's Sakir. It's Sakr is how it spells. So I believe that's pronounced Sakir because otherwise it's Sacker, which I don't think is right. And honestly, Sakir with that hawk was awesome. The hawk was great. And the hawk was awesome. The hawk was awesome. And so he's had all that. And so from this point, he's gone through the first half. He's unsafe. He understands the situation. And then now he's moved on to the second leg. And what I think was interesting too about the second leg was that in this moment, he had some self-doubt. He has some self-doubt in terms of whether or not, A, not only could he finish the race the second leg, but also B, he didn't like how Hidalgo's hooves looked. Because Hidalgo already gone through the first leg, which they never say how far the first leg is, but if you just imagine it's halfway, that means Hidalgo done 1,500 miles, like 1,500 miles. That's a long way.
Do you think some of the incentive, though, for looking at his feet and all that was because of the 30,000 that Sheikh was offering him?
You mean, no, the 30,000 was from Lady at Davenport to drop out.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah, from Lady. He's like, well, because I was wondering, I was like, if all the races that he's won, collectively, is it 30,000? I mean, like, to me, 30, I'd take 30,000 right now if I could win a race. Sure. I don't think I would quit in the middle of a race, but for the 30,000. But to me, it was like, okay, what's making him reconsider? Is it the money, or is it the things that she was saying in that point in time to look at his horse's legs?
I don't know. It is an interesting thing of where the 30,000 does allow you to say that he is unimpeachable and cannot be bought, because $30,000 then is $1 million today. So that is not a small sum of money. When you think about it, it is not a small sum of money to take to not race, because she was going to pay him $1 million to do nothing.
Yeah.
So to be driven in this way of where you want to complete this race and you want to do this thing and you want to accomplish this and you want to win, because he wants to win.
Absolutely.
He's very low key throughout the whole movie, but he wants to win. And
he's a competitor, man.
He is. And so to then say, but wait, I'm turning down $1 million, because $1 million, that's life-changing money.
Yeah.
To turn that down to just continue on to a race where at the end of the race, you're not getting that much money.
It was $100,000 purse.
Was it $100,000 purse?
Yeah, it was $100,000 purse.
Oh, I guess, yeah. You know what? I guess now that you say that, I guess if you win it, then yeah, you do get that, because 100,000 now, well, that's 3.4 million. So I guess he was betting on himself. Which
I never got the impression though that he was really in it for the money until that moment, because that's why I was like, he never, like, to your point, right? You didn't even know that the purse was 100,000, and it's because, I mean, visually, I don't feel like it was like pounded in us that the purse, the whole purpose for some of these people of this race is to be able to prove you're thoroughbred and to be able to get that 100,000 and that to be able to say I did this race. But for him, I don't necessarily think that that's his driving point. It's because everybody's telling him you can't do this, and your horse isn't gonna be capable of winning it.
And they kind of aw shucks him, where he's like this whole, like, I'm just a racer, man.
Right. I like that. They just aw shucks him. Yeah, they totally do that to him. Yeah.
The thing too, when I think about kind of circling back around when I was saying the first half of it, if you assume that it was 1,500 miles, it's basically then to provide perspective. When I looked up the size of the United States, the 3,000-mile race would be going from one end to the other, and then another 200 miles east to west. But north to south, it's only 1,650. So basically, you'd be like, if you went from north to south, the northernmost point of the United States to the southernmost point, the United States, that's the first leg that he completed. And so, and I was just saying that just to kind of get an idea of the scale of what that really means in terms of how long they're racing. And so, when they get to the second race, I think the other part with the horse, he's doubting himself. He's doubting the horse because the horse hooves don't look good. And then they have the moment where Hidalgo frees himself and is staying at the starting line for the second leg, then looking back at him like, all right, let's go. And that kind of gives him the extra push up. Okay, well, the horse wants to do it, so I'm going to do it, so let's go.
I wanted to get up and go like, yeah, let's go. Like, how could you not? The horse is right there. And he's looking back over his shoulder like, dude, you going to get on or what? Because I'll run this myself.
The horse was basically questioning his manhood and being like, are we doing this or not? So then, yeah, which was a great scene. And look, the movie's a straight ahead adventure movie. It is honestly, I think it's a great family movie. It's a great family movie. It's a straight ahead adventure movie. And in that moment, I was like, I cannot believe I'm having a little bit of an emotional reaction to this movie. Like that moment, I was like, oh, it was sweet and inspiring all at the same time. And This is not at all what I expected to happen with this movie.
100%. Yeah. No, the way that it grabs you, maybe it's the story, maybe it's the adventure. You think, oh, wow, nobody's going to be able to do this. And then you see how he's just like continually pursuing and moving forward and stepping over every little roadblock that is in his way. And he's sitting there thinking and saying out loud, he's done. And his horse is like, no, man, I understand you 100%. I ain't done.
Right.
Don't count me out.
Right. We're doing this.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, it's almost like a Rudy moment, Not to say that it's a similar, but I mean it's like that the way that first time that anybody's watching Rudy and like he gets that call out there. It's like that. It's that energy and that charge and that like, wow, man, yeah, let's get on that horse, dude. Yeah, let's do this. Like who's slapping you on the ass? You got to slap the horse on the ass. Who's slapping you on the ass to get up there? Hurry up.
horse ass slapping aside. So then when they continue the second race, the second part, the other things of that where I felt was interesting was not only did the rescuing of Jazeera helped them in terms of understanding that locusts were not a plague, because that whole locust swarm thing was like, okay, you're just gonna, I guess, I don't know, die in this, I don't know. And then that that they weren't a plague, but then also how the various aspects of getting to the second leg. And so I guess my question for you is this, and I'll ask you first before I give you my opinion, is what did you think of the second leg? Because by this point, he's done the first leg. Just finishing was the reward in the winning. He's gone through the dealt with bigotry and people not liking him, and he's also dealt with it. He saved the daughter. So when the second leg happens, so what did you think of how they handled the second leg?
At this point in time, we're pretty deep into the movie, so I mean they could have stretched the movie a little bit longer and showed us more, because I don't think that we really got to see a whole lot more from the second leg. You're sitting there and you're dealing with that horrible heat and the ocean, and then of course his horse. But I mean it's like leading into all that. I feel like if we're keeping it 1500 was the first half and the second half is the 1500. So we're guessing. And if we go from where we left off to where his horse is falling over and he's contemplating,
killing
him at the end, right? And, and he's really dealing with that whole thought process of like, yeah, I can't put this on my horse anymore. It's like, there's not a whole lot in between.
Well, I guess there is. No, I guess I'll have to push back a little bit there with that. There is, because between the second leg is when Khatib and his raiders then attack them again. It is when they create the trap that harms Hidalgo. Remember when he has a trap where he falls down and gets spikes,
there's that,
and does that, and then also Frank does the thing which is it's one of those weird expected, not expected things where he just kills a team, where you're like, oh, I didn't realize you just murdered people. But okay,
right?
But he did hurt your horse. He hurt your horse, so he's got to die. I get it.
Right.
I'm on board with that. And
but in respect of the race and 1500 miles, everything that you just said, that implies like they're racing and doing this all at the same time, right? They're going towards the end state.
Nope.
So I mean, like from the race perspective, I'm not seeing a whole lot other than, to me, this is an implied storyline that something happened. And they're still able to continue to move forward with the 1500. I mean, I enjoy it. Don't get me wrong. I absolutely enjoy it. And I'm nitpicky right now because I'm like, well, I didn't see a mile marker. And and then all of a sudden this storyline happened.
Yeah. Where are the highway signs?
Right. Exactly. So, I mean, I get that. And I thought it was still a great story, but from the second half, yeah, I guess I kind of jumped the gun and forgot about the whole pit and the raid and all that stuff. Because to me, it was just part of a really good part of the story. I even forgot that it was part of the second half, because it's just the action just continues to happen. There's always something that wraps you up. And, when he and his horse fall into that trap and his horse gets hurt, I mean, like, yeah, I'm getting kind of teary-eyed because I'm like,
yeah,
well,
I thought the horse was dead. I was like, there's no way the horse is living through that. Yeah, the horse is dead. They're rescued by Secure, and so which is
his name.
Honestly part of the second half. We just glossed over Secure going into the quicksand and it needed to be saved, and what he did.
Yeah,
and then the whole like, I'll save you, and then you can do what you want afterwards. Which
let's talk about that, because
my initial of that scene. So he saves him, he pulls him out of the quicksand. So Hopkins pulls him out, and then the last thing you see Secure say is, "Give me my sword." And at that moment, I thought, oh, Secure committed suicide. I did not think that because the whole, like, you can't help me, you can't help the race, it is the will of Allah that I would die. And then, of course, the other side of it, where Hopkins believes that his horse, that Secure's horse, came and found them to then save Secure. And I keep calling him Secure, and I'm just assuming that's how the name is pronounced.
We'll go with it.
And so you have the two different perspectives of what that moment is. But then at the end of it, I thought that Sakir killed himself. So I was surprised when I saw Sakir was still alive to pull Hidalgo out of the pit.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, that out of respect to the race and the laws and the rules of the race, which we're only introduced into what I feel like maybe 2 or 3 of them. I feel like there's probably like a laundry list of like some
I'm sure
things.
there are plenty.
Yeah, so that's probably like a whole nother movie within itself.
Yeah.
I was left with the same impression that he committed suicide with his sword because the way of the laws of this race. That was one thing I wanted to talk about. Like, what's the possibility of all the other rules? With you on that, and I'm glad that you brought it up. And also, I thought it was kind of beautiful that his horse went to go and seek Frank. Because and to me, it's because of his Indian blood and the fact that he's of the horse people, and it's almost like the horse knew it, So I don't know. I just thought it was kind of like a touching, beautiful moment.
I guess at the end of the day, if you're attributing that to the horse, I think the horse would have done it because he was like, well, you're an infidel and you're not beholden to these rules, so you will help him. And I think it's that.
Ooh, deeper. I like that.
Yeah,
See, I went. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
if you're attributing that to the horse, because there is an aspect of where we want to attribute that to the horse, that the horse was actually seeking him out, versus the horse is just wandering around and they just happen to stumble across him. Pick your poison, which happened. Either way, if the horse did, I think the horse would have sought him out because he's the only other racer that would have helped him. Any other racer would have let him die.
But wouldn't you wanted to help him not only because he was an infidel, but because he was of Indian descent of the horse people?
No, I think that's a cultural thing. I don't think that being Native American versus being Saudi Arabian, as far as when you're comparing which culture is more horse driven, especially at this time, or which was more horsebound, I think that's all the same. I think the big difference is that his American side was like, well, I wouldn't let you die. I'm fine beating you in a race, and that's all good. And I'm 100% on board with that. If there's some advantage I can create for me, or a disadvantage for you that will mean I win the race, I'm on board. But I'm not going to let you die. Right. Whereas in the Saudi Arabian culture, it's like, no, you're just going to die.
That's your fate. Sorry.
Exactly. Yeah. Allah said you were going to die. Deuces.
Right. Which is back to that line that he said. He's like, whatever you do after I pull you out, that's on you, buddy.
Exactly. Which is why I thought he committed suicide. I was very surprised that he was there to pull them out. This movie constantly surprised me. This movie, I was with you. I was like, when I saw the trailer, I was like, all right, we'll do this. I know it was my idea. And I was like, this movie's probably not going to be any good. And we're going to talk about it. Like, we're going to bash it. And I was like, nope. I like this. Even that moment, I'm kind of like, no, I'm digging it. There was so much about this movie that I liked. And I like the idea that he killed himself. And honestly, I'm a little disappointed that he didn't. But, fine. He had to save the horse. Okay. He had to save Hidalgo. I'm fine with that, because anything that saves Hidalgo, I'm on board with.
Right.
But it was another aspect of this movie where this movie was consistently surprising me that I liked it, because there's so much about this movie I should hate. And and what I mean by that is like just the whole, what you opened with, the Disney PG-13 adventure, whatever movie, if you wanted to, you could argue a little mixture of some white savior in here. And it's like, yeah, I should hate all of this. And it's like, no, this movie's great. And so but moving on from that, he was about to kill Hidalgo because Hidalgo got exhausted. They ate some locusts and he was exhausted and fell out. And then he was going to kill Hidalgo, but then he had the Native American vision thing where he saw which turned out to be his mother or other ancestors or whatever, and then didn't kill Hidalgo, and then Hidalgo got up and they realized they were near the end, and then they finished the race and win. And so that part was honestly the only part of the movie where I was like, okay, I understand why this is happening, but I was like, yeah, just, get up and win the race. Like, I don't know that I need the whole, you have a vision of your ancestors and then try to come to grips with who you are with that, because I don't feel that going through the rest of the movie. I don't feel that there was a real transformation as much as a convenient point of where the ancestral blood of Native Americans that he had in him helped him to this moment, but it didn't necessarily change that much about who he was as a person.
Now that we're talking about it, I completely understand where you're at with that. My thought now that I'm thinking about it is that in that moment, sure, we could have gone ahead and seen his horse get up again, move on, and like, yay, second charge. For the character building, it's almost needed so that he can continue to move on. I think for him, it's like his character, it's for him to spiritually be able to move on, and is the helping drive for the finish of the race. But it's almost like they're symbiotic together and symbolize his end of everything that he was harboring and dealing with because of what he felt he could have done in the massacre. I don't know. To me, sure, visually, did we need to see it? I think we do, because it does connect him back to him, and he asked for help, right? And he had no other help that he could deal with or look for at that point in time. Nobody's around him, right? So
Right.
now he's falling to his spiritual side, which is his Indian ancestry side. So now he's calling out for help for that, and then together, because or not because of his chance, his horse is lifted up and are able to move on. And I think it just symbolizes the ability for him to be able to be like, even though they don't go over it throughout the movie, he's thinking about what is going on and what has transpired in his past and who he is. And now it's almost like he's reached out for the help. The horse has gotten up, and it's symbolic as, okay, you know what? We've hit another situation. We've hit another issue, and I'm going to rely on the last leg that I have, which is my spirituality side, and seek one last help. And he receives whatever help he needs in that moment. We visually see it how we see it in the movie, but I think the character receives what he needs, and Hidalgo receives what he needs to, and that's just a rest. It's good rest, and they lift up and they move on. And I think it just connects to everything, the spiritual aspects of what he's struggling with his ancestry and everything that he could have or could not have. Geez, can you imagine what the man has been thinking about all on his own for 3,000 miles? I mean, like, the torture that's going on in this man's head, and it's so, I don't know, to me, it's like, it just wraps it all up. Like, that's in my head, it would just wrap up everything, and it would just put the dot and the T dotted and crossed, and I can pick up and move forward. And then visually we see them, they're picked up and they're moving forward and they're racing.
Yeah, that's great. It definitely hit me differently, but honestly, your version I think is better than mine. So at the end of it, there is, he wins, so Hidalgo gets up, wins the race, because Hidalgo wins a sprint. They win the race, they go to the ocean, they jump around in the water for a bit and everything, and then he goes and gets his money, which is the equivalent of $3.5 million, goes back to the States, and then buys the Mustangs, frees them, and then lets Hidalgo go. I found myself interestingly surprised that Hidalgo would go with the ball between them. I'm surprised he went, but then also it is like a moment of, this was the horse that I had at this time. He was special to me. He was a legend. He was a legend as far as distance horse racing. But what he wanted, his distance horse racing was done. Like the hooves were already halfway through the last race. He was like, no, he's done. And so that in a sense, it was like, here is your retirement present to be able to then run free with your brethren.
It's like you're in my head. So it's kind of creepy because that's exactly what I was going along with. To me, it was it was a retirement scene. It was, you have served your purpose with me. We were buddies. We were into it together. We understood each other, and I'm freeing everybody else. And, I'm going to leave it up to you. You can be free with everybody else, or you can still be with me. I took it as, when Hidalgo looked back at him and a couple of more times and was running off and kind of bucking around before he joined up with the group, I took it, and literally in my head at that moment was like, yeah, it's like his retirement send-off. I don't necessarily know what the time period was on that, like in Frank's life, like
how old Frank was?
Yeah, like how old Frank wasn't how old the horse was, because I mean, I was thinking like, yeah, this horse has only got a few more years left in it after after all these races.
Right. They never really explain how old Hidalgo is. They do, there's part of it where you see Frank, so I assume he's somewhere in his 40s, like mid 30s, early 40s during this entire movie. And that's just my assumption. And all this would have happened, a year or two after.
That's what I'm kind of thinking too.
When Hidalgo looked back, I read it more as a thank you. Thank you for letting me go. Thank you for this wonderful adventure we've had together as a team. It's been great. I love you, but I'm out.
I'm going to go get my stud on because, these horses have heard what I've done. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. There's some fresh fillies up in here, and I'm going to get a hold of that. You know what I'm talking about, partner?
No, and I don't know. I know I enjoyed that last scene. For me, it seemed like spiritually for Frank, it was like, the exclamation mark to his closure of everything that he's been dealing with. It was like, if I couldn't free my Indian culture and my Indian counterparts and peers, because unfortunately they were all slaughtered, I can at least free their spirits, their spirits being all the Mustangs. Yeah. I don't know. I enjoyed that scene. And to think like, wow, then I was wondering like, well, how much do you have to pay the government that was rounding all of them up and paying people to kill them?
Not 3.4 million. I'm gonna tell you right now. I bet you that was like 1,000. Like it probably wasn't that much. It was like, so if he won $100,000, I bet he paid maybe $2,000 for those horses. It's not. It wasn't. Those things wouldn't have been 3.4 million. I think the last thing I want to say, which is definitely just a whole different perspective on the whole thing, was I think the actual hero of this movie, and honestly the focal point of this movie, is Hidalgo the horse. The name of the movie is Hidalgo, so then that should tell you right there that we're talking about the horse. And here is why I think that. So let me run down for you my bullet points of where I think. Yeah, well, I think that this movie was really was about Hidalgo. One, he doesn't feel the self-doubt and anger and hatred as far as what happened with Wounded Knee. He feels that they should have done more, but they didn't. He then sticks around with his friend throughout while he's doing self-hating in the Wild Bill show, where he's like, no, I can be better, and I can be bigger, and I can do all these amazing things, but I am not bowed, I am not defeated. Even though we are here, I'm trying to help you get through this. Then he goes through the bigotry and hatred because he's an impure horse. And then he successfully gets to the first leg of the race, which no one thought he'd done. Then he's allowed to rest for a bit. And then he has a mini adventure for rescuing Zero from Khatib, because there are aspects of that where the horse does a lot of things which are interesting in that whole little vignette of a lot of independence. He unties himself from the post. He helps, he lets Jazeera bride him out, that, and then he catches Frank Hopkins on the way out and everything, and he gets out in time with it. And honestly, he's running so fast. He's running fast with 2 people on his back, and he's still able to make it. He is tired, and he is hurt, and his hooves are worn down, but he's going to finish this race. And honestly, in this movie, he has the Adrian, where he is being doubted about being able to finish this race by Frank, and he gets on that finish line, and he's like, we're going to do this, right? And from that moment on, Frank decides, all right, I'm going to believe in you too. And that is actually where the hero Hidalgo was given I don't know if this permission is the right word, but permission, acceptance, or availability or ability, whatever you want to call it, to then do and continue the thing he wants to do, because Hidalgo's going to win this race. He gets injured in an attack by Khatib, and then he goes further than thought possible in the second leg of the race. He eats some locusts. He's exhausted. He's almost killed by his friend. He gets to live through a near-death experience because when we watch the movie, we think of it from Frank's perspective of, oh, I'm going to lose my horse. From Hidalgo, he's like, look, this is near death. I almost died. Then he gets up, he finishes, and he wins the race. And what he does by winning the race is he generates enough money to get his friend to go back home and buy his brothers and sister Mustangs that are all in captivity. And then he has them freed. And he himself is now free to run the countryside with them as a free horse. This is the story of how Hidalgo was the hero throughout.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was the voice of Hidalgo by Ocean.
You have the perspective of Frank Hopkins and throughout the movie, and there is a movie there, which is honestly quite enjoyable. But at the end of it all, I realized that this movie's about the horse.
You have a character that is the leading character that can't speak, that somehow we end up pulling for. Was there a particular aha moment throughout the movie that you're like, yeah, this movie is just, he's the hero. This is our hero.
2 points. One, way back in the beginning when Aziz goes to the Buffalo Bill show, and Buffalo Bill says Hidalgo is a legend among these parts, right? He says that about the horse, not about Frank Hopkins.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And then the other part which solidified it was when Hidalgo's at the starting line of the second leg. When he's at the starting line of the second leg looking back, I was like, oh no, this is not your film. This is his film. And you're along for the ride.
Man, Jim, it is always great to talk about movies with you. If you really enjoy the show, please become a supporting member at thenextreel.com/join. For $5 a month, you will gain members-only access to bonus show content for this and many other shows in the Next Reel family of film podcasts. Like, rate, listen, and most importantly, share this podcast with anyone you know that loves sports and movies.
So, Jim, I was thinking about part of this movie where the opening credits of it start based on a true story. And so I started looking up the veracity of the trueness of the story. So what I did is after I saw the movie and I enjoyed the movie, I decided to find out, well, which parts of this are true and which parts were made up for the movies. And
all right.
Yeah. And so let me see if I can explain to you succinctly what I found, and then we can go into the details.
Okay, let's do it.
Here is succinctly what I found. The true parts of this movie are Frank T. Hopkins was born or lived in Wyoming, and in 1965, he died in 1951. And that's it.
What?
Nothing else about this movie is true.
Shut the front door. Are you kidding me?
No, nothing. It was not only is, so let's start with the big thing. The 3,000-mile race across Saudi Arabia. There is no historical example in Saudi Arabia or anywhere else of a race this long ever existing.
Okay, so full disclosure, what little I Googled on this, that answers so much now. Because like I Googled, I was like Frank T, found it, was like cool, neat, and then it was like 3,000-mile race in Arabia. Couldn't really find anything. I was like, moving on. I'll put that in my notes to research later. Didn't research. So yeah, move on. I can't wait. Let's do this.
Yeah. Yep. So the race is not real. They have no evidence of that.
Nothing like it.
Nothing.
Nothing.
Not a thing. And on top of that, the few people that even hear about the race happening, they're like, well, that would have been impossible. That in 1890, you had to go from one coast to the other in the Americas, and then an extra 200 miles back, and on a horse. So, and even then, the terrain in the Americas is much friendlier, and I'm including the Nevada-Arizona desert because the Saudi Arabia is way worse.
Way worse.
So yeah. So the people that any historians that have ever heard about it, they're like, yeah, that would have been impossible. It never happened. There's no evidence of the race ever even existing. 2, there is a claim in the movie where the Frank T. Hopkins is a part of the Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. False. So there are historians about the show about Buffalo Bill because Buffalo Bill is fairly famous. A lot of historians about him and his life in the show, and there is not a single bit of evidence that Frank T. Hopkins was ever employed or part of the show.
Really? No connection in that regard? I mean, maybe they ran into each other in somehow way, but...
None.
Okay, so did any of your research indicate anything that was that is a story that was foretold by Frank, or was that a story that was put together for the movie?
Well, okay. So then there are two aspects of this. One, there's that. The other one, which I think we should definitely talk about, was he claims to be Native American, specifically of the Lakota tribe, and that is not it is not only unsubstantiated by the Lakota Nation, because they have no record of him or his mother, and do not claim that he was a part of it at all. So he wasn't even Native. So there's that. Now, there are various aspects of it where it sounds like what happened is at the time of Frank's life, he told people these stories of this race, of this horse, of this adventure, and of these things. And people wrote it down. And some people actually believed it to be true at the time because he told it in such an amazing way. But anytime you dig into any of it, there is no evidence of not only the existence of the race, but that he was a member of the Lakota Nation. He was never in Buffalo Bill's Wild Show. That none of it is true. Even to the point of, honestly, there's not necessarily a lot of substantiation for the horse. And the horse is like the hero of the show. The other part of it that is true is that the crawl at the end, they does say he was an outspoken proponent of Mustang freedom rights, or Mustang rights to roam free throughout the Americas. True. But he also, there is the thing of where he gained a reputation for distance riding in his autobiographical memoir. And it was unpublished in his lifetime and to accounts to friends. And that's where all that stuff comes from. But he, not only, he seems to have lived a very urban lifestyle and he was not actually a cowboy.
I'm dumbfounded. I'm speechless because, it says like it's based on a true story. What little I Googled, I saw even just that little part that you were saying, like about the Mustang advocacy in like Oklahoma. I saw it was like he was like responsible for some Mustang ranch or some Mustangs being untouched in Oklahoma or something like that. I was like, oh, cool. That's awesome. Yeah, that tracks with the story. And wow.
Yeah.
So, okay, I'm wondering, and it's not like we've got a fact-checking team or anything like that, but if this was a possible race ever, not saying that Frank participated in one, but if there ever was a particular race, is there anything in your research that said like any Arab country or nation or Arab line of a particular stud, because, they have kept those bloodlines very clean. There's nothing in any of the stud handling that anybody can point back to like, oh yeah, no, that was a race but it was done like in the 1300s, not anywhere like in the 1800s.
No, there are various long distance horse races that happened at the time, both in the Americas and in Saudi Arabia. But the race in Saudi Arabia was like 300 miles. It wasn't that. It wasn't 3,000. It was a few hundred miles. It was not. And there is the fact that the race existed, and so that part of it is known, but there was not a 3,000 mile race to that far. It was just insular inside of a country, similar to the long distance races that are even the one that's depicted at the beginning, where there's like a 400 mile race inside of the United States. Like those races did in fact happen. Now, there is no evidence that Frank C. Hopkins was a part of any of them, but those races did happen. And horse races that were a few hundred miles at that time in history there were some. I don't know that common is the right word, but there were plenty of them. And so then, they existed.
Well, and it was important back then because of kind of like what they were even saying in the movie, you and your Pony Express can get out of here. I mean, it was the way that mail made it from point A to point B. And if you could find somebody like a Frank that could navigate fairly quickly, you would want to pay them. So, I mean, there was a serviceable purpose for also some of these races too, was to be able to be like, hey, look, these guys can do it better than these other guys. And you'd want to employ somebody like a Frank who's always winning these races versus, somebody who's entering the races and, barely finishing.
The interesting thing to me with the story is that if this is a fun movie and it's great, and you hear based on a true story, you immediately go into a kind of this adventure mode of, wow, what would I do if I was in this situation? But it is interesting to me when I looked up about it, because I was just curious about like little things. Like I want to know what happened to the horse, or like, what else, kind of like little things like that. Like, what little things did they dramatize? Well, and
especially at the end of the movie, it's like Hidalgo's running around with the herd and his, they didn't say it, but it's like they indicated that his seeds being spread all over the place because he was running with the herd cell. Right?
Exactly.
And I'm like, oh, that's beautiful. I mean, it's a dramatization. That's fine. Whatever. I believe that horse ran around and spread his seed, and there's good running Mustangs out there that have Hidalgo bloodlines. That's what I'm going with. Either that or Frank actually shot him somewhere and ate him or something, because that's another storyline too.
Why not? Like, yeah, there's
let's go.
It's just as good as reasons any other, because there is a thing of where I was surprised that there are still wild horses in the Southwest. And I actually came across them about 2 years ago in Las Vegas. I was riding a motorcycle. We were out. Well, it wasn't Las Vegas. It was in Nevada. We were out in the middle in the desert area of Nevada, and a bunch of wild horses ran across the road. And so they do still exist. They are still out there. So there is some of that. But when you hear based on true story, there's a mindset and you get into with it. And with this one, it was, while I was looking up, look, this was really well done. And I was just curious what was dramatized. I was just surprised to find out that effectively it's a fable. Frank Hopkins made this story up, and that's what we're watching, which honestly, he made up a good story.
Yeah. And then somebody, was able to monetize that. So, I mean, good for Disney for taking that. Or maybe it was a family member that was like, hey, I found these old books of Frank, and this is a great story. Like, okay, I'll buy that for like $10,000.
Exactly. Yeah, whatever it was, they got the rights to it, they made it and everything, and so they provided a myth. And at the end of the day, Disney is good at that. If you think about various Disney movies, those are myths. I mean, honestly, the entire Marvel universe, you could argue, is a myth. Now it's a myth written by Stan Lee, but it's still a myth. They do a great job of putting that together and doing that, and so they did it here.
But they don't say at the beginning of the movie this is based on a true story, though.
Well, no, except Spider-Man. Spider-Man is real. Look it up, kids. All right, so
which is perfectly appropriate for right now because it's very, very spidery season right now.
Yeah, that was the thing that I was surprised by, and I thought I would share with you that. As much as we like to believe in these things, that this is just a myth, and it's a good myth, and it's a good story. It's entertaining. It should not keep anyone from watching it, but just know that.
Yeah, definitely.
Literally none of it is true. I mean, not only that, like the way Wounded Knee, they depict Wounded Knee in the movie, it didn't happen that way. It's all like that part was one of those ones where when I saw it, I was like, I don't think it happened like that, and it didn't. The true history is way worse.
Way worse.
Way worse what happened in reality. So instead of digging into that, if you want to know about that, Google it yourself, because it's way worse.
There hasn't been a movie made.
Well, I think there definitely are other movies made about what happened at Wounded Knee, but yeah, it's much worse. And so that aside, he was apparently the one thing that is somewhat substantiated is that they feel that at some point in time he was a member of Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus. And he did do stuff there, but he was never a part of the Buffalo Bill show. And this entire story was made up. So that is your public service announcement for the day, ladies and gentlemen, that this is a myth. Enjoy it as such.
Well, thank you, Ocean, for bringing that to our attention and kind of bursting my bubble a little bit about Hidalgo.